Good morning, DJ Stosh here. This is my entry into the contest that Steve Carlson is holding for your a minimum of 5 go-to albums. I really worked long and hard trying to figure these out, and in the end I just kind of skimmed through my collection and grabbed records left and right, and I came up with 40 LPs and 10 CDs. So I'm going to try to keep this video under 25 minutes. So just to quickly begin, here's the first group of 5. Okay, these are sort of in reverse chronological order. So the first one is going to start with the W's, and it is the Waterboys. This is the C. This is an excellent record. Mike Scott, of course, the lead singer, has some of my favorite very bombastic tracks on here. Don't Bang the Drum, of course, the big radio hit, The Hole of the Moon. The Pan Within on the other side, Old England. This is the C, a nice acoustic number. Trumpets, just enjoy every song on here. Can listen to this album anytime. Okay, next up, relatively recent band, a British band called Temples. Sounds like they beamed in a time capsule straight out of the 60s with authentic organ sounds. Just really psychedelic, excellent tunes. If you've never heard them, be sure to check them out. This is their album Sun Structures from a couple of years ago. It's a limited pink vinyl edition. Saw them in concert in Orlando. They were excellent. Okay, next up, one of my all-time favorite albums, Spirit of Eden by Talk Talk. I can pop this record on at any time and just kind of get lost in the music. Only has 6 tracks, probably none of which you've ever heard on the radio. The Rainbow, Eden, Desire, Inheritance, I Believe in You, and Wealth. This really marked a departure for Mark Hollis as a songwriter, and kind of launched him into a lot more abstract and experimental music, and it hangs together extremely well. I urge you to pick this up if you've never heard it, or if you're only familiar with Talk Talk from their radio hits. Okay, album number 4, the Surf Punks, California band, Dennis Dragon. Really funny music, My Beach, My Wave. Let's see, can't remember all the other, Shoulder Hopper, The Dummies, stuff that I really enjoyed in high school. I'll spin it every couple of years, never gets old to me. Might be a little juvenile for some of you out there. Wonderful album. Okay, and then the last of the first 5, Sir Mix-a-Lot, Swass. Of course, believe it or not, my favorite song on here is Buttermilk Biscuits, Keep on Square Dancing. It's also our daughter's favorite song. Excellent Seattle hip-hop from the late 80s. Check it out if you've never heard it. There's a lot of good stuff on here. Of course, Posse on Broadway is the big hit. Don't know what else to say about that. Great album. Love it. Okay, album number 6 in my go-to list is Prefab Sprout, Steve McQueen. This is really where Paddy McAloon came into his own as a songwriter. It's produced by Thomas Dolby, who selected most of the tracks, and the production is amazing. Technical skill is incredible. The songwriting is first caliber. Not much else I can say about that. It's a legendary album. You should have it in your collection if you like 80s indie pop or just generally astounding music. Okay, this is a personal favorite of mine, Robert Plant, The Principle of Moments. I like just about every solo Robert Plant album and Led Zeppelin album. So this is probably the one that I enjoyed the songs from the most. It had a couple of mild radio hits on it, Other Arms, In the Mood. I don't even know, Through with the Two-Step got played on the radio. Big Log, of course, was the big hit off of here. Great stuff. Very different from Led Zeppelin, though, I warn you. Okay, I could have selected a bunch of New Order albums, but I decided to go with Technique from 1989. It has that Balearic beat to it. You know, kind of a product of the Hacienda with the crazy neon colors. Just love this music. There's some dancey stuff. There's some more acoustic type stuff on it. Of course, it has the big hit Round and Round. I like Mr. Disco quite a bit. And every time the needle drops and I hear Fine Time, it puts a smile on my face with the interesting sounds. Great album. Of course, there's other excellent New Order albums to check out too, but give this one a try if you've never heard it. Okay, next up is Nazareth, Malice in Wonderland. Some of you might think this is an odd choice for Nazareth, but I love early 80s Nazareth. I've mentioned it on my YouTube channel before. This one just has some very sweet melodies, some super nice guitar playing, Songwriting's typical Nazareth. You know, it's probably not the greatest in the world, but I like it a lot, and I can pop this on at any time and enjoy it fully. Standout for me would probably be Showdown at the Border, then Big Boy, Hearts Grown Cold, pretty much all of side 1. Side 2 has a couple of tracks that aren't maybe the best in the world, but anyway, yeah, Nazareth, Malice in Wonderland. Okay, and then number 10, I'm going to go with Meat Puppets, Up on the Sun, an album that is very hard to describe, sort of punky bluegrass, very technical guitar playing from the Kirkwood brothers on bass and guitar, and it's lovely music. It's very easy to listen to, very different from their earliest days where they were kind of shrieking, more of a straight up hardcore outfit. This is where they really got into their sort of you know, cowpunk phase. Anyway, Meat Puppets, Up on the Sun. Okay, next is album number 11, which would be Judas Priest, Screaming for Vengeance. An album that will just come roaring out of your speakers. Has this beautiful cover art too. Everybody's heard You've Got Another Thing Coming, but this album just flows so well. The Hellion, the instrumental, goes right into Electric Eye, and then you have Riding on the Wind, makes you just want to jump on your motorcycle, which I don't have, and go running down the road. It's one of the classic 80s metal albums, and I love it track for track. Okay, number 12 might be a shocker for some of you, Falco. Yes, he's overwrought. Yes, he is not the greatest singer in the world, but hey, I love it. I love Rock Me Amadeus. I love the fact that they used a Cars backing track for Munich Girls Looking for Love. I love the way he mangles Dylan's It's All Over Now, Baby Blue. What can I say? I just love this album. I love it so much that my friend DJ Kraftwerk and I went to visit his tombstone at the Zentralfriedhof Cemetery in Vienna a couple of years ago. So, obviously, I'm a big Falco fan. Okay, Max Eider from the Jazz Butcher. This is a wonderful little solo record. It's one I would say as a budget bin album you can usually pick up pretty cheap. I think I might have paid, well, I paid $3 for this copy. This is my second copy. It's not really any hits on here, but it's got a great little light, loungy feel. It's just an easy album to sit back and listen to, you know, with a glass of beer. It's called The Best Kisser in the World. If you never heard the Jazz Butcher or Max Eider, I recommend that you go check them out. They're a worthwhile band. Okay, next up, Dexy's Midnight Runners. Of course, Let's Make This Precious is probably my favorite song on here. The biggest song everybody would know, of course, is Come On Eileen, but there's some really great tracks, and then there's some sort of suites of songs on here too. Just like Dexy's quite a bit, they have some silly videos for sure, but the music still stands the test of time in my opinion. Tu Rye is the name of that album, by the way. Okay, I had to pick one Kate Bush album. It was very difficult. I'm going to go with The Dreaming, which preceded her huge breakthrough album, Hounds of Love. But The Dreaming has some excellent songwriting on it. I really like to dig into the lyrics on this one. The varieties of sound on this are very all over the map, but yet it all kind of hangs together well. And it's got a beautiful song called All the Love, and of course Houdini. Pull Out the Pen is one of my favorites. There Goes a Tenor. It's just an excellent album, so check this one out too if you've never heard Kate Bush. The next album is by a band called Bongwater, which is Kramer's band from the late 80s. Put out a lot of interesting records during that time period and into the early 90s. This album's called Double Bummer. It's a double album. I think it's the only double album that I selected, but there's just so much quality stuff on here. There's a lot of pastiche, cut and paste, interesting takes on pop songs. There's a version of a Led Zeppelin song, Dazed in Chinese, which is Dazed and Confused, sung in Chinese. Snippets of Richard Nixon and other spoken word pieces, and it's hard to describe. You just have to listen to it to absorb the whole thing. Big college favorite from the 80s, Double Bummer. Okay, Big Country, Steel Town, kind of a depressing album, but very well produced by Steve Lillywhite. Beautiful cover art. This is the domestic pressing with a hype sticker. Believe it or not, the European gatefold is actually a lot nicer than this, but it's one of my all-time favorite albums. I love every track on it. Songwriting is impeccable, and it just has the sound. It sounds like it was recorded in a blast furnace. You probably know them from In a Big Country and maybe a few other songs. There weren't really any big hits off of this album, but there were songs that got radio airplay back in 1984, but I love it. It's a personal go-to album for me. Okay, here's another one from my childhood, Styx, Pieces of 8. Most of you probably know all the songs on here, so I'm not even going to mention. This is a Nautilus Superdisc version. Wonderful guitar solos and songwriting on here by all three of the songwriting members of the band. It's a great album. Not much more to be said about that. I could have picked a couple of Styx albums, but I went with that one. Same with this band, Steely Dan. Just an incredible catalog of music to choose from. But I'd have to say my go-to album is Gaucho. It just has a certain vibe to it. It's beach music. It's great for you know, hanging out in your beach bungalow if you have one, which I don't, and listening to this and just kind of grooving to the sound. And it's also one of the most strenuously produced exercises in production in the history of pop music. So, okay, and then rounding out, those were all the albums that I haven't cleaned yet. So getting into the albums that I have cleaned, we have The Sound, their second LP, From the Lion's Mouth. Song Winning is really the song that anchors this album, but it's such a high quality production, and every album by The Sound is totally worth owning. I just happen to enjoy the songs on this one the best. Adrian Borland's band, if you've never heard them, they didn't get much airplay back in the 80s. They're sort of resurfacing now and getting some critical acclaim. More people are being exposed to their music, but check out The Sound. Beautiful album. Great tunes. Okay, album number 21 is A Kiss in the Dream House by Susie and the Banshees. I believe this came out in 1982. And I purchased my first copy of this when I was in England. It has a sort of dark, poetic, surreal vibe to it. I like the cover composition and imagery quite a bit also. It's almost this kind of Art Deco look to it. They have an extensive and wonderful catalog. This just happens to be my favorite album by them. Okay, a band not many people have heard of over here, Section 25. This one has, I believe, some Bernard Sumner production from New Order. The band Section 25, this is their third album, has really fascinating cover art. Great kind of techno-pop music from, I believe, 1984. Section 25, From the Hip is the name of that album. Okay, I really, really love this one. Scritti Politti, Cupid and Psyche 85. So the title gives you a clue as to when this album was released. Gart Greenside, wonderful songwriter, very wimpy voice, which works quite well within the context of this music. Quite a few radio play songs on here. But anyway, this is one I could throw on anytime and enjoy it. In fact, I just played it last week again. Here's a perennial classic, The Police, Ghost in the Machine. Of course, all of the Police albums are classics except perhaps for side one of Synchronicity, but fortunately this album doesn't suffer from any of those problems. Track by track, it's simply amazing. Most of you have probably heard this album, so I'm not going to dwell on it. Ghost in the Machine. Okay, here's a more obscure band, a recent band. This is Pianos Become the Teeth. The album is called Wait for Love. Saw them in concert in Orlando. It's sort of, I don't know, indie rock, emo kind of stuff, but that probably doesn't really suit the type of music very well as a description, but I like it a lot. I've played it over and over again, so it's a go-to album for me. Okay, next up is a band I've seen twice in concert. This is Low Moon, and their album is just called Low Moon. This one is signed by the band. Believe it or not, when I saw them in DC a couple of years ago, they played Bonnie by Prefab Sprout, which is on another album that I just showed earlier. Anyway, they have a little bit of a talk sound, modern pop, rock, and just superb music. Go check them out if you get a chance. I know that's made a lot of people's top 10 lists in recent years. For Led Zeppelin, the album I'm going to choose is Houses of the Holy. I think it's their most consistent album, and I know a lot of people would argue, and that's fine. I love all of the Led Zeppelin albums. This just happens to be my favorite, probably because it's the album that has Over the Hills and Far Away, which is the only Led Zeppelin song I've ever learned to play part of on guitar. Okay. I know a lot of people will disagree with this choice, but hey, what can I say? Jethro Tull, Under Wraps from 1984. Synth heavy. I didn't know it had a crappy drum sound when I first bought it because I had a really crappy stereo system. So the songs just kind of became ingrained into my brain, and I still love them to this day. I think it's some of Ian Anderson's finest songwriting. Peter John Vitesse was an excellent keyboardist, short-lived with the band, but I do like this album. A lot of people hate it. I don't know why, but that's okay. Okay, my favorite Japan album and a go-to album for me, Tin Drum. Mick Karn's bass playing is just off the planet. It has a very holistic sound. I mean, it just sounds like all of the songs were recorded in one day all together. If you've never heard Japan, I would say this might not be the album to start with, but you should get to it pretty quickly because it is a superb album. Okay. And let's see, I think this is up to maybe album number 30, Janet Jackson, Control. To be honest, back in the 80s, I wouldn't have given this album the time of day. It was on the radio far too much. Didn't really care for the music that much. Picked up a copy a couple of years ago and played it and played it and played it. Played it in the car. I really appreciate the production on it and the songwriting. I love her voice. It's a great album. What can I say? Janet Jackson. Okay, album number 31 is Genesis, self-titled from, I believe, 1983. Quite a few radio hits on here. Yeah, Mama, That's All, Illegal Alien, Taking It All Too Hard, Just a Job to Do. Every song has its own character. Some are a little bit cheesier than others. I just like it a lot. Some of the unsung songs on here, Home by the Sea and Second Home by the Sea, kind of creepy. Good stuff. A go-to album for me. Okay, Fleetwood Mac. Could have picked quite a few different Fleetwood Mac albums, but I'm going to stick with Mirage. I love Mirage. I think Lindsey Buckingham did an excellent job producing this album. It's got some of his most interesting guitar work outside of his solo career. Every song is great. Even songs that I didn't like as much in the early 80s, like Straight Back, I've come to appreciate quite a bit in recent years. I can pop this on at any time and just really love listening to it. Okay, I picked one Felt album, which is Poem of the River. It's almost a mini LP. It clocks in about, I think, 35 minutes. It has 6 tracks. Lawrence's band, this one came out, I think, in 1986. This is one of the few domestic pressing albums that you could get by Felt because it was on the Relativity label. It's excellent music, really dreamy, kind of a early 80s, not pop, but indie pop. I don't know what you'd call it, but anyway, it's a good album. Okay. Here's another bold and brassy album, Baby. The Stars Shine Bright by Everything But the Girl. I have this on vinyl and CD. This is pretty easy to pick up cheap. I think I might have paid $3 for this copy. It's got a promo stamp. Every song on here is wonderful. It's a good album to play around the holidays. Has that kind of feel to it. Everything But the Girl. Okay, and then another rap album. I have Eric B. and Rakim's first album, Paid in Full. Of course, there's the very dope track, Paid in Full, which samples some Ofra Haza. But it's got Eric B. as president on here, Chinese Arithmetic, some really other killer songs. Definitely one you want to have in your collection. Okay, I am out to pimp this album anytime. This is Walter Egan, Not Shy, has the single Magnet and Steel, which a lot of people know, but it's California pop rock, and it's wonderful. It's got some added touches by Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks in it. Has a beautiful cover, and I am his biggest fan in Florida, so I'm always out to push Walter Egan's music whenever possible. Another favorite from the 80s, Haircut 100, Pelican West. Really giddy English pop written by Nick Hayward. He had an album that came out not long after this called North of a Miracle. I could have just as easily selected that as a go-to album, but I'm picking this one. Okay, for the Cars, I pretty much could have picked any Cars album, but I went with Heartbeat City. I just absolutely adore this album. I like the production on it. I like the fact that it's got a killer ballad and drive. You can't tire of listening to this over and over again. So it's got moods for every occasion. Okay, for Iron Maiden, I'm a huge Iron Maiden fan, but I decided to pick Peace of Mind, a pivotal album in the Maiden career. That's where Nico McBrain came on board. He's still with the band today as their drummer. Just killer classic new wave of British heavy metal cuts on here. When you hear those drums hit on Where Eagles Dare, you know that you're going to be off on a wild ride. So just nothing more to say about that album. You got to go out and get it. Maiden is classic. Okay, another go-to album for me, A Flock of Seagulls, produced by Bill Nelson, came out around 1982. I have a Japanese copy and a domestic copy of this. I love it so much. It's got some great songs that were radio hits, like Iran and Space Age Love Song. But check out some of the deep tracks too. Modern Love is Automatic, DNA, and Man-Made. I don't think there's a bad song on this album. Okay, so that does it for my 40 vinyl albums. Now I'm going to show you 10 CDs real quick. These are not really in any particular alphabetical order. So starting off with AC/DC, for those about to rock. This is a reissue. Could have picked a lot of AC/DC albums. Of course, most people's go-to album is probably going to be Back in Black, but it amazes me that they were able to come out immediately and put out an album that I think is as good as Back in Black, and I haven't heard it as many times. So for me, it's more of a go-to album. I love every track on it. Next up, Monkees, another band. It's difficult for me to pick a go-to album. There's just so many I could grab off the shelf and run with, but I'm going to select Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Jones Limited. It's got some of my favorite Monkee songs on here, like She Hangs Out, The Door into Summer, which I would put in my top 5 Monkee songs of all time. Even the silly Cuddly Toy is tolerable. But then Pleasant Valley Sunday, Stone Cold Classic, What Am I Doing Hanging Round, etc. Love this album. Okay, a band from Wales, I believe from Cardiff, the Pooh Sticks, Million Seller. Didn't get a lot of airplay. It's a great album. Listen to this one through the headphones. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on. It has some songs that are very radio ready, like Let the Good Times Roll, The World is Turning On. That was the greatest song, but then there's a couple of lighter numbers scattered in between. Sound like a meteorologist there. Anyway, wonderful band. They put out some quality stuff in the late 80s, early 90s. I think this is their best release, Million Seller. Okay, I'm going to pimp an album by my friend Kenny Howes. Kenny is from Mulberry, Florida. Puts out incredible power pop albums. This is his second one, conveniently titled Kenny Howes' second album. Cover might look familiar to some of you. It's got some of his personal classics like Easy on the Eye, Girls with Glasses, and it also has some hidden tracks at the back that aren't really part of the album, but they're kind of funny, him covering the Posies and so forth. It's got an incredible cover of the Left Bank's She May Call You Up Tonight. So if you can find this, you probably would have to get a digital download of it. The actual physical media copy's hard to find. Never released on CD. Okay, a band from New York that I like quite a bit, Ida. This one's called Will You Find Me? This became a go-to album for me when I really closely listened to the song Shotgun, which I think is one of their finest songs. But this is an album I can pop on and just really, really soak it in. So it's kind of mellow, acoustic, mostly music. Really good stuff. Okay. For Black Sabbath, surprisingly, I did not pick an Ozzy album. My favorite Ozzy go-to album would be the 9th one, which is, hell, I can't even remember the name of it. Anyway, so I'm going with a Dio one, Mob Rules. Just some great energy on this album, but also some really kind of language sections and really nice, smoky, bluesy playing from Tony Iommi. But turn up the night every time I pop the needle on the record or the CD, pop it in. It just really gets my blood rushing. I love this album. Okay, A.R. Kane. Now, I didn't want to pick a double album from them. I probably would have picked the album I, but I decided to go with this one, Nuclear Child, which was their last album. I showed this in a previous video a couple of months ago. It's got some really nice jazzy bass lines, and just the songwriting is enchanting on here. If you don't have this one, it's pretty easy to pick up for not very much money. And it was recently reissued on vinyl, or issued for the first time on vinyl. Okay, Echo and the Bunnymen Ocean Rain. I also have this on vinyl. I am showing the CD version from the early 2000s, which has some really nice little bonus tracks, as do all of the other Echo and the Bunnymen reissues. Of course, Mac and the Boys called it the greatest album ever made, and The Killing Moon, the greatest song ever written. They weren't too far off the mark, I don't think. Check it out if you've never heard it. It's just a really fine pop from 1984. Okay, and then let's see, next to last, 49th selection would be the Durruti column, Obey the Time. Vinnie Riley does not have any vocals on this one. I just really enjoy the flow of this album. It gets a little bit experimental. He's got some new synths and keyboard sounds in there, but his classic style of guitar playing is still there. And he just takes it in some really interesting directions, and I like to listen to this album all the way through, track by track. So it's a go-to album for me. And last but not least, Cocteau Twins, Heaven or Las Vegas. I really should have this on vinyl, but I have 2 CDs of it, the original and the reissue from a few years ago. I can't tell a difference sonically. This is probably my #1 go-to album of all time. And I've already talked pretty extensively about Cocteau Twins, so I'm just going to leave it at that. Those are my 50 albums, and I hope you enjoyed the video. And Steve, I hope you enjoyed watching it. So thanks for checking it out.